In the heart of Rajasthan, India, stands the formidable fort of Chittorgarh, massive citadel of stone, towering walls, and narrow winding passages. But beyond its grandeur lies a dark chapter of obsession, honor, blood-soaked terror. The story begins with Rani Padmini, or Padmavati, a queen of extraordinary beauty, intellect, and grace. Her fame spread far and wide, reaching even the ears of Alauddin Khilji, the Sultan of Delhi. Khilji, notorious for his ambition and cruelty, became obsessed with her, not for diplomacy or alliance, but for her beauty. In 1303 CE, Khilji marched with a massive army towards Chittorgarh. Rani Padmini and her husband Raja Roel Ratan Singh prepared to defend their fort. Knowing the Sultan's reputation for relentless cruelty, the fort was besieged for months. Khilji's army cut off supplies, attacked relentlessly, and used psychological warfare to break the morale of the defenders. Stories say he sent spies, tried to deceive the king, and even offered peace in exchange for the queen, but Padmini and her people refused. Faced with inevitable defeat, the women of Chittorgarh, led by Rani Padmini, decided on a terrifying ritual, Jauhar. In this ritual, women immolated themselves to avoid capture and dishonor at the hands of invading armies. Thousands of women, dressed in fine clothes and adorned with jewels, walked into the massive pyres lit within the fort. Screams of agony, the crackling of fire, and the terrifying realization of imminent death filled the air. Raja Ratan Singh, along with the remaining soldiers, fought to the death. Knowing there was no chance of victory, after days of fighting, the fort finally fell to Khilji, but it was empty of its queen and most of the women. Psychological terror. The obsession of Khilji and the lengths he went to capture Padmini show human cruelty at its peak. The ritual of Jauhar, thousands of women choosing death over dishonor, is horrifying, especially imagining the flames and the chaos inside the fort. The ghosts of Chittorgarh. Even today, locals claim that the fort is haunted by spirits of the fallen, particularly near the Padmini Palace, where flickers of light and whispers are sometimes reported at night. The destruction of humanity. The siege demonstrates how desire, obsession, and pride can turn a majestic kingdom into a scene of horror. Rani Padmini's story is remembered in poetry, folk songs, and legends, but it also serves as a dark reminder of the brutality of war and obsession. Many historians debate the accuracy of her story, but the chilling elements of the siege, the ritual, the bloodshed remain an undeniable part of Indian folklore, even centuries later. Wandering the ruins of Chittorgarh at night is said to make the skin crawl. The echo of screams, the scent of burning, and the shadowy corners of the fort make it one of the scariest historical locations in India. After the catastrophic siege, Chittorgarh Fort was eerily silent. The echoes of the battlefield were replaced with the smell of charred wood and flesh, the moans of the dying still lingering in the wind. The victorious army of Alauddin Khilji wandered through the fort, expecting to find treasures and captives, but instead, they were greeted by ash, ruin, and a horrifying emptiness. It is said that the spirits of the women who committed Jauhar refused to rest. Every night, flickering lights were seen near the remains of the pyres, as if the souls of the fallen were wandering, searching for peace that never came. Soldiers reported cold gusts in the middle of summer, whispering voices calling out names, and shadows moving along walls that should have been empty. Local legends speak of Rani Padmini's ghost, walking the ruins, her face veiled, carrying the weight of the lives she could not save. Her eyes, even in spirit form, are said to burn with fury and sorrow. Anyone daring to enter the Padmini Palace at night would feel an invisible hand brushing their shoulder or hear the soft, anguished sobs of women. The Sultan, despite his victory, did not find peace. He brought back stories of Chittorgarh's horrors and the Jauhar fire, which haunted him in his dreams. Some chroniclers suggest that Khilji suffered from paranoia and nightmares, imagining that the ghostly flames were chasing him. He became increasingly cruel to his own court, seeing conspiracies in shadows. A reflection of the fear and horror he had unleashed on Chittorgarh. The surviving Rajput warriors who had escaped reported seeing strange things as they fled. Faces of women burned into the walls of the fort, visible only in the flicker of torchlight. Unseen hands pulling at soldiers' armor, slowing them down as if the dead didn't want them to leave. The cries of newborns and children, though no children survived the Jauhar, filling the corridors of the fort in the dead of night. These stories spread across Rajasthan, making Chittorgarh a place everyone feared even centuries later. Travelers would avoid it after sunset, and it became a symbol of both heroism and horror. Over the years, attempts to rebuild Chittorgarh never succeeded. Every construction effort was met with strange accidents, fires, or inexplicable deaths, which locals attributed to the restless spirits of Rani Padmini and the women of Chittorgarh. By the 16th century, the fort was partially abandoned. The ghostly aura persisted, some say, at midnight. If one listens carefully, they can hear the chanting of women performing Jauhar, or the clashing of swords in a battle that ended centuries ago. Even today, Chittorgarh draws paranormal investigators, historians, and thrill-seekers. Reports include shadowy figures crossing the courtyards when no one is there, flickers of torchlight inside empty rooms, thought to be the spirits of soldiers or women of the Jauhar, cold spots and sudden drops in temperature, especially near the Padmini Palace. The fort is not just a monument, it is a living nightmare, a place where history and horror blend seamlessly. What makes this story truly terrifying is not just the fire, blood, or battle. It is the unending sorrow and fury of the souls trapped in history. The Jauhar was not just an act of bravery, it was a mass sacrifice that left behind lingering horror. Generations later, the screams and shadows of that night still haunt those who dare to step inside. Chittorgarh. Centuries had passed since the fiery siege of 1303 CE. Yet Chittorgarh Fort never truly rested. Locals whispered that the fort was cursed, a place where history refused to let go of its victims. By day, the fort was majestic, echoing tales of Rajput valor. By night, it became a haunted labyrinth, where shadows moved with minds of their own, and the air smelled faintly of burnt wood and blood. In the early 20th century, British officers stationed in Rajasthan were among the first to report paranormal activity. Officers patrolling the Padmini Palace at night claimed to see a veiled woman gliding along the corridors, her feet never touching the ground. Some heard sobbing and whispers coming from empty rooms. One officer wrote that the cries seemed to say, "Return what you took. Release us." Soldiers reported seeing flames erupt spontaneously in abandoned courtyards. Even without a match or torch, the British dismissed it as superstition. Yet the patterns were too consistent to ignore. The villagers living around the fort were more direct in their warnings. They refused to enter the fort after sunset, claiming that wandering spirits of the Jauhar night sought revenge or company. Women swore they saw Rani Padmini's ghost, her face veiled, standing silently atop the walls, watching over the ruins. Her eyes, when glimpsed in moonlight, were described as glowing with fury and sorrow. Shepherds reported that livestock would mysteriously panic near certain corners of the fort, as if sensing invisible presences. One of the most infamous stories is called the Night of Shadows. A group of paranormal investigators entered Chittorgarh Fort at midnight. Armed with cameras and flashlights, they explored the Padmini Palace and the pyre sites. Soon, strange events unfolded. Their torches flickered violently, even in the absence of wind. Cameras captured shadowy figures moving behind walls, figures with indistinct shapes, sometimes appearing as crowds of women in flowing robes. Cold spots appeared suddenly so intense that breath turned visible in the middle of summer. The group reported hearing a rhythmic chanting, like women performing Jauhar, growing louder the closer they approached the pyre site. Terrified, they fled the fort, leaving their equipment behind. When the footage was reviewed, it revealed faces imprinted in shadows, some screaming, others with expressions of agony and anger. Historians later suggested that these could be echoes of the past. Trapped in the walls of Chittorgarh, legend says that Rani Padmini's spirit is bound to Chittorgarh, eternally guarding it and her fallen sisters. People claim if you disrespect the fort or its history, the ghostly queen appears often as a reflection in mirrors or water tanks within the fort. Travelers have reported being led by unseen hands through dark corridors,
Either toward safety or perhaps toward a hidden death.
Some nights, you can hear a chorus of whispers pleading for honor, vengeance, or release, drifting across the courtyards, even today. Photographers, historians, and thrill seekers swear by these supernatural phenomena, though skeptics dismiss them as imagination. Yet, when standing in the Padmini Palace at midnight, the fort seems alive, listening. In judging human obsession and violence, the story begins with a king's desire, leading to death and destruction. The mass sacrifice, thousands of lives lost in fire, create an imprint that even time cannot erase. Restless spirits, ghostly sightings, whispers, and apparitions bridge centuries, making history feel alive and threatening. Human obsession and violence. The story begins with a king's desire, leading to death and destruction. The mass sacrifice, thousands of lives lost in fire create an imprint that even time cannot erase. Restless spirits, ghostly sightings, whispers, and apparitions bridge centuries, making history feel alive and threatening. Unsolved mysteries, no one can explain the flames, cold spots, or voices that appear centuries after the event. Chittorgarh Fort is no longer just a relic of Rajput. Bravery, it is a haunting monument, a place where history and horror are inseparable. Visitors may see the walls, but the shadows of the past see them too. The moon hung low over Chittorgarh Fort, pale and lifeless, as if even the sky feared what was about to happen. Inside the fort, silence had replaced hope. No drums, no battle cries, only the sound of breathing and fear. Her footsteps echoed against stone walls that had once heard laughter, music, and celebration. Now they heard only whispers of death. Women stood on both sides of the hallway, mothers, daughters, queens, servants. Some clutched children to their chests. Some stared blankly at the walls. Some were already crying in silence. Padmini stopped. She turned. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of doom. Tonight, we choose how history remembers us. No one screamed. No one protested. They already knew deep inside the fort massive pyres were being built, wood soaked in oil. Perfumed cloth laid carefully over stone, torches burning low, waiting. The smell of smoke began to rise before the fire was lit. Crawling into every corner of the fort like a living thing, children began to cry. Mothers covered their mouths. Outside the walls, Alad and Khilji's army waited, sharpening blades, laughing. Believing victory was near, they had no idea what horror awaited them. One by one, the women dressed themselves in their finest clothes, red saris, gold jewelry, flowers in their hair, not for celebration, but for death. A young girl asked her mother, "Will it hurt?" The mother said nothing. She simply held her tighter. Padmini stood at the edge of the massive pit. Flames had not yet been lit, but heat already rose, as if the fire could sense what was coming. For a moment, just one her hands. She trembled, not from fear, from grief. She looked at the women behind her. Thousands of lives, thousands of stories. Ending in one night, she closed her eyes and nodded. Torches were thrown. WHOOSH, the fire roared to life. Screams erupted, not from pain at first, but from terror. Women began stepping forward. Some prayed. Some screamed their children's names. Some walked in silence, eyes empty. The fire swallowed them all. Hair burned. Jewels melted into skin. Cloth ignited instantly. The screams rose into the night sky, so loud that even Khilji's army fell silent outside the walls. Some soldiers dropped their swords. Others turned away as the fires consumed the women. The Rajput men opened the gates, covered in saffron cloth. Knowing death awaited them, they charged. Swords clashed. Blood sprayed stone walls. Bodies fell in piles. They fought not to win, but to join their families in death. By sunrise, no defender was left alive. When Alauddin Khilji finally entered Chittorgarh, he found nothing. No queen. No women. No victory only? Mountains of ash, burnt bones fused into stone. A silence so heavy it felt alive, it is said Khilji walked through the ruins. His face pale. For the first time in his life he felt fear. That night, Khilji dreamed. He saw women rising from fire, their faces burned. Eyes glowing, he saw Rani Padmini standing above him. Untouched by flame, she spoke only one sentence. "You did not win." Khilji woke screaming. From that night onward, history says his mind never found peace again. Even today, people say, fires light themselves in the dark. Women's cries echo during full moon shadows. Gather where the pyres once, burn a Chittorgarh, not haunted by one ghost. It is haunted by thousands, and they are angry. Even today, people say, fires light themselves in the dark. Women's cries echo during full moon shadows. Gather where the pyres once burn a Chittorgarh, not haunted by one ghost. It is haunted by thousands, and they are angry. Chittorgarh Fort officially. It closes before sunset. There is a reason for that. Locals don't call it superstition, they call it experience. In 2012, a group of 4 university students, 2 boys and 2 girls, decided to spend a night inside Chittorgarh Fort. They were not drunk. They were not reckless. They were documenting historical sites at night for a project. They entered quietly at 11:47 p.m., slipping through a broken section of the outer wall. The moon was full. Too full. At exactly 12:06 a.m., one of the girls whispered, "Do you smell that?" It wasn't grass. It wasn't dust. It was burning hair. The smell grew stronger as they moved toward the Padmini Palace. Their camera batteries dropped from 90% to 0 within minutes. Every single device near the palace courtyard. They heard it, not wind, not insects. Women whispering together. Dozens of voices, some crying, some praying, some laughing softly, horribly. One voice became clear. "Why did you come here?" At 12:31 a.m., the shadows moved. Not randomly, they formed lines. Tall, thin silhouettes, women in long garments, walking slowly toward the old Jauhar site. One of the boys raised his camera. The screen showed something else. Not shadows, faces burned, hollow-eyed, mouths open mid-scream. The camera shattered in his hands. Then they heard crying, a child, a little girl's. A voice from behind them. "Mother, it hurts." One of the girls turned. She screamed. Behind her stood a small figure, hair burnt short, skin blackened, eyes glowing faint orange. It reached out. The temperature dropped. Instantly, frost formed on stone. The fort changed. Corridors twisted. Steps led nowhere. Doors appeared where there were none before. They ran for what felt like hours, but their watches never moved past 12:47 a.m. Time was trapped. Near the main gate, everything went silent. No wind. No insects. A woman stood ahead, tall, veiled, untouched by fire. Rani. She did not walk. She floated. Her voice was calm. "You walk on our ashes." One student collapsed instantly, unconscious. Padmini raised her hand, not in anger, in warning. "Leave, and tell them to remember." At 6:12 a.m., guards found 3 students outside the fort gate, unconscious, burn marks on their palms. Hair partially singed. The 4th was missing. Never found. No body. No remains. Only her phone. Recovered weeks later near the Jauhar site, the last video recorded was 14 seconds long. It showed fire and women walking into it. Authorities called it mass hallucination caused by fear. But they quietly banned night entry permanently. No exceptions. Locals still say, never say Rani Padmini's name loudly at night. Never laugh inside the fort after sunset. Never step near the Jauhar site after dark, because The spirits do not want revenge. They want witnesses. Chittorgarh is not haunted by death. It is haunted by choice, and sometimes history chooses you.